Shabbat shalom, everyone. It's good to see all of you. Earlier this week, I made the journey to the far-off distant land of Louisville, Texas, to visit family. For those of you who don't know, Louisville is a suburb of Dallas, and I decided to stay at the True Hotel by Hilton, which I must say was conveniently located in the parking lot of an enormous, now defunct shopping mall. Now, the reason I booked this hotel was because it had a good rate online, but also because it looked a bit more modern, and it looked a little less depressing than the other hotels in the area. But I soon learned that maybe this whole operation was a little too modern for Jonathan. Maybe I've turned into an old cantankerous fuddy-duddy. I don't know. The hotel was nice, and it was clean, but the signage all around the hotel was too peppy for me. Let me give you an example. They had a big sign when you entered that said, quote, "A true stay will make you the best version of yourself." I don't know about that. I don't think I can be the best version of myself when I look out the window and see a dying corpse of a once beloved shopping mall. That's not particularly inspiring for me. And I feel like even the cosmetics they offered in the room were too much. I'm used to staying at hotels that offer little bars of soap, little bottles of shampoo. I like that. This hotel chain obviously wanted to save money on these types of materials, so they just had big tubes of goo mounted on the wall of the bathroom, which you had to squeeze in order to get the stuff come out. And when you squeezed it, all the stuff would pour out over the counter and make a huge mess long after you touched it. And remember that peppy messaging I was talking about? They even had it embroidered on these tubes of goo in the bathroom and the shower. The body wash had a statement. I took a picture of it. It read as follows, quote, "When life gives you too many lemons and you've misplaced your happy place, we present, in big letters, joy-inducing lemon and sugar body wash." Joy-inducing. That is a pretty big sentiment for wall goo. It was like the body wash was talking to me. It said, "Wash with me and you'll have joy." I did not have joy. On Wednesday night, I went out to dinner with my family, and I got back a little later. I was pretty tired, so I went to bed. And as I was drifting off to sleep, the fire alarm went off. So I was very disoriented, and I sprang out of bed, and I threw some clothes on, and I was out the door pretty quick because I didn't want to burn alive in the True Hotel in the Louisville Mall parking lot. Got the heck out of there. And as I was heading toward the stairs, I noticed that a lot of my neighbors were opening their doors half-dressed just to peek into the hallway. And after they seemed convinced that there wasn't a fire, they just went back in their rooms, content to die near the Louisville Mall. And the people that did come out of their rooms started lining up at the elevators. They thought this was completely normal and safe, a safe thing to do while the building is supposedly on fire. And then they thought I was weird when I told them that they should take the stairs. I said the elevator's not safe. They looked at me like I was crazy. They needed some joy-inducing wall goo. So I just left them to their fate and raced down the stairs to the lobby to figure out what was going on. When I got to the lobby, there was one employee behind the desk. She looked about 19 years old. Just for reference, this child was the only employee I saw during my entire stay at the hotel. And I don't know what was going on with her, but she did not seem to be bothered or even aware of the fact that the fire alarm was blaring throughout the building. She didn't seem to care that dozens of people were arriving in the lobby to ask her questions. I was the first one that got to her. Like I said, I blitzed out of that room. And I was pretty frightened and still disoriented by the whole event. So I blurted out to this girl, I said, "Is there an actual fire or is this just a drill?" And she gave a very reassuring response. She said, "Huh." I thought she'd say something else, especially given the fact that I was still looking at her like a crazy person. But she didn't. So I paused and I asked again. I said, "Ma'am, is the building on fire?" She looked down at her shoes and said, "I had no idea what this girl was saying. Now, in her defense, maybe she was panicking too. I don't know, maybe English wasn't her first language. Maybe she was really shy. I still don't know what was up with her. But I'll tell you, it was not especially reassuring when the only employee of the hotel was mumbling incoherent gibberish while the fire alarm is blaring. Now, by the time my Q&A session had run its course with her, at least 10 other people had arrived in the lobby. And all of them had questions for her. And God bless her, she answered them in the same style that she answered me. And like me, everyone was confused. And everyone kept asking, "What? Huh?" One guy said, "Ma'am, you've got to answer us clearly. Are we in danger?" And I'm pretty sure she responded with, "I don't think so." I don't think so? You've got to have a better answer than that when the building is supposedly on fire. She did not. That's all she could come up with. I think that's the only semi-coherent thing I heard her say. And when I heard that, I just decided to wait outside in the cold because I didn't want that to be the last quote I ever heard on this earth. So I stood out there shivering and waiting for something to happen. I don't know exactly what. Now, about 5 minutes later, the fire department arrived, and I watched the firefighters from outside through the window like it was a movie. And they even tried to talk to this poor girl, but she continued to babble nonsense to them. They asked her, they said, "Where's the control room? How many people are staying here?" I think the firefighters eventually had enough of her shtick because they just left her behind the desk and just started poking around the hotel trying to find out the root cause of the alarm, while all of us just stood panicked and annoyed in the lobby and outside. Now, eventually the lead firefighter stood in the center of the room and he shouted, "Listen up, everyone! There was an error with one of the fire alarms which caused it to go off unnecessarily, but there's no fire and no cause for alarm. You can all go back to your rooms now. Everything is okay. Sorry for the inconvenience." Now, when he said that, I thought I would expect to hear a bunch of annoyed groans from all of the hotel patrons, but I think we were just so happy to have someone communicate normally with us. There was a big sigh of relief. And everyone just accepted this news and happily went back to their rooms. It's like we had all been through a traumatic experience together and we were all patriots and compadres, so happy just to be away from that woman. As I was lying back in bed, afterwards, I was trying to fall asleep again, but I couldn't stop thinking about that young woman behind the desk, because I still didn't know how to feel about her. On the one hand, I was frustrated, I was scared, I wanted answers. We all did. And the one person whose responsibility it was to handle the situation, to speak to us with clarity, to reassure us, she simply couldn't do that. But on the other hand, I felt a deep sense of compassion for her, because she reminded me of someone from Jewish tradition who once stood frozen, overwhelmed, and unable to get the words out the way they needed to be said. And as I lay there, I kid you not, I thought, this is Parshat Vayera. This week's Parsha comes from the second Parsha of the book of Exodus, and it contains a quote from Moses to God after God commands him to confront Pharaoh and order him to free the people. Moses' quote is painfully honest. He tells God, quote, "Behold, the Israelites have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? V'ani aral shvatayim, for I am a man of uncircumcised lips." This is a very interesting quote. In my opinion, a slightly odd choice of words. Uncircumcised lips. We've actually heard this from Moshe before. And all the sages are all over the place as to what this actually means. Some assert that Moshe has a stutter when he speaks. Others suggest that he has some kind of speech impediment. Others are convinced he's just not a great orator or public speaker. Whatever the reason, this statement he makes is incredibly powerful, and I think it's vulnerable too, because Moshe is essentially saying, if the people closest to me won't listen to me, how could anyone else? This is a very human moment that Moshe displays. And I think that many of us can relate to it because we often measure our worth by our results. For instance, we think that if an important conversation didn't go well, our first assumption is it's because we failed. If our words didn't inspire change, we assume something is wrong with us. Now, notice Moses doesn't say Pharaoh is stubborn. He doesn't say the timing is bad. He says it must be my fault. And I think many of us walk around carrying that same fear. We think, I tried to explain myself and it didn't work. I tried to help, but I wasn't heard. I tried to speak from the heart, but it fell flat. So oftentimes, we stop trying. We retreat. We convince ourselves that our lips are metaphorically sealed like Moshe, that our voice simply doesn't matter. But here is the quiet miracle of this moment in the Torah. God does not remove Moses from leadership. God doesn't say, you're right, let's find someone else. God does not wait until Moses suddenly becomes eloquent or confident. Instead, God sends him back again. The same Moses, the same mouth, the same doubts, but with a new mission. Because the Torah is teaching us something essential here. Success is not a prerequisite for holiness. Clarity is not a prerequisite for calling. And being heard is not a prerequisite for speaking. Friends, our job as Jews is not to guarantee results. Our job is to be present for one another, to speak when it's hard, and to try again even after disappointment. That night in the hotel, we were desperate for someone to make sense of the chaos. And when the firefighter finally spoke clearly, it was a relief. But Moses teaches us that God often works through voices that tremble first. I mean, keep in mind, without this girl's mumbling, I'd have no sermon for today. So when you feel like Moses in this Parsha, when you feel like you've spoken but haven't been heard, when you feel like you've tried and still failed, when you feel like your lips are uncircumcised or blocked or inadequate, know this: Hashem is not done with you, and your voice is not dismissed. And finally, your struggle does not disqualify you, because the same God who sent Moses back to Pharaoh is the same God who stayed with him through doubt and resistance. And friends, that's the same God who stays with us too, even now. Well, friends, the next morning, after a stressful night, I decided to take a shower. And for whatever reason, I decided to use the joy-inducing lemon and sugar body wash wall goo. Now, did it fix my problems? No. Did it make me more articulate than Moshe? Probably not. But I must admit, for a brief, shining moment, standing there covered in wall goo, I felt a little calmer and a little lighter, and maybe, just maybe, even a little bit more joyful. Shabbat shalom. May we all find simcha in the wall goo.